The first letter came from a bank congratulating me on selling 98 brand new homes in the upscale Elderwood Heights subdivision, which was weird because I hadn't sold anything. I also didn't remember owning a subdivision. That is, until I pulled up the county land records and realized every single one of those homes, driveways, lawns, mailboxes, and all was sitting squarely on my 12-acre plot. I'm Daniel Morrison, a retired machinist who bought a big chunk of land decades ago outside of Pine Valley, Colorado. I leased it to a cattle rancher for years. Apparently, during that time, Linda Peton, president of the Elderwood Heights HOA, decided my land was unused and worked with a developer to incorporate it into their community. No one asked me, no one paid me. They just bulldozed the pasture and built their HOA wonderland. At first, I thought this was some kind of hilarious paperwork mistake. But Linda wasn't laughing. When I confronted her at the HOA office, she informed me with a sneer that I was trespassing on private HOA property and threatened to call security if I didn't leave my own land. She actually snapped her fingers at me like I was some stray dog she was shooing away. Then she sent me an official notice that I was in violation of HOA bylaws for parking farm equipment in a residential zone, even though my tractor was sitting in what used to be my own field. Then came the cherry on top. She billed me $14,200 in annual HOA dues and said they'd put a lien on my home if I didn't pay, despite me living 2 miles away in a completely different neighborhood. The letter was printed on fancy letterhead with gold embossing, and she'd signed it with a flourish that took up half the page. That's when I stopped trying to reason with her and called a property lawyer named George Sullivan. He nearly choked on his coffee when he saw the survey maps. The builder had developed 98 homes without ever acquiring the deed. Linda had signed off on it with a notarized land transfer document that, shocker, didn't exist in the county records. She'd apparently told the developer that the land had been abandoned and that adverse possession laws applied, which would have been hilarious if it wasn't so legally ridiculous. George explained to me that not only did I still own the land, but technically under property law, I also owned everything built on it. Every foundation, every wall, every perfectly manicured lawn. One certified letter later, the HOA learned they were squatting on 12 acres of private land. And legally, every improvement they'd made, including the homes, was mine. My attorney filed a formal quiet title action, which basically told the court that this land was mine, and here was the proof. The judge agreed without hesitation. Linda's smug smile vanished in real time as she realized she had just turned her dream neighborhood into the world's most expensive case of illegal occupancy. Her face went from confident pink to ghostly white in about 3 seconds. And she actually grabbed the edge of the defendant's table to steady herself. Then I gave them the bill, $3,000 per month per house in land lease fees, retroactive to the day they broke ground. That's $3,000 by 98 by 14 months, which equals $4,116,000. The HOA treasurer audibly swore in the courtroom, and the judge had to bang his gavel for order. They tried to negotiate. I declined. Linda personally came to my actual house 3 times, each time with increasingly desperate offers. First, she offered to waive all the fake fines she tried to impose on me. Then she offered me a seat on the HOA board. Finally, she showed up crying, begging me to think of the families. I reminded her that she should have thought of them before building on land she didn't own. They tried to sue me for extortion. They lost. They tried to claim adverse possession. The judge literally laughed. They tried to get the state involved, claiming I was destroying a community. The state attorney told them they were lucky I wasn't pressing criminal charges for fraud. When the first round of homeowners got eviction notices from me, chaos erupted. The monthly HOA meeting turned into a screaming match that required 3 police officers to break up. Linda resigned for personal reasons the day after the local news aired a segment titled HOA President Builds Neighborhood on Wrong Land. The footage of her running from the news cameras while covering her face with her purse became a viral video that got over 2 million views in the first week. Most residents opted to buy their lots from me at fair market value plus legal fees. The smart ones negotiated quickly and got reasonable deals. The ones who tried to fight it ended up paying significantly more once their lawyers explained their position. The rest simply moved, cutting their losses. I rented a few out as Mountain View villas for vacationers, which turned out to be surprisingly profitable. Now, the HOA still exists, but I'm a voting member since I now own 16 of the homes outright. The other board members treat me like I'm radioactive, which suits me just fine. My first motion as a board member was to repeal the bylaw banning farm animals in residential zones. It passed 4-3, with the other members too terrified to oppose me. My second motion was to build a chicken coop where Linda's prized rose garden used to be. The roosters start crowing every morning at 5:30. Linda ended up having to sell her own home to pay her share of the legal fees and the retroactive lease payments. The last I heard, she was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of Pine Valley, working as a receptionist at a dental office. But the real kicker came 6 months later when the district attorney's office decided to pursue criminal charges. After all, the investigation revealed that Linda had forged several documents, including the fake land transfer and multiple inspection certificates. She'd also taken kickbacks from the developer totaling almost $200,000, which she'd hidden in an offshore account. The forensic accountants found everything, including emails where she explicitly discussed how to cover up the land ownership issue. The trial was swift. Linda tried to play the confused old lady card, claiming she didn't understand the paperwork. But the prosecutors had her emails, her forged signatures, and testimony from 3 different contractors who said she'd threatened them if they raised questions about the land ownership. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. She was convicted on 8 counts of fraud, 3 counts of forgery, and 1 count of racketeering. The judge, clearly tired of her theatrics throughout the trial, sentenced her to 7 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay restitution of $850,000. When the verdict was read, Linda fainted dramatically. But nobody rushed to help her. Even her own lawyer just stood there shaking his head as the bailiffs eventually helped her to her feet and led her away in handcuffs, her perfect HOA president blazer now wrinkled and her carefully styled hair falling in her face. The story should have ended there, but Linda's arrogance had created a paper trail that kept unraveling. During the investigation, the forensic accountants discovered she'd been embezzling from the HOA itself for nearly 5 years before the land development scheme. She'd set up fake vendor accounts and was approving payments to companies that didn't exist. The pool cleaning service that billed $8,000 a month was actually her cousin's bank account. The landscaping company that received quarterly payments of $25,000 was registered to her maiden name. When they tallied everything up, she'd stolen close to $600,000 from the HOA funds that were supposed to go toward community maintenance. The special assessment she'd pushed through for new streetlights had actually funded her kitchen renovation. The emergency repair fund for the community center had paid for her daughter's wedding at a resort in Aspen. She'd even billed the HOA for her personal cell phone, her car lease, and somehow managed to classify her weekly spa treatments as community beautification expenses. The homeowners who'd supported her for years were devastated. Margaret Dawson, who'd been the HOA secretary and Linda's biggest supporter, sobbed openly in court when she realized the community garden project she championed had actually funded Linda's swimming pool. Robert Turner, the former treasurer who Linda had pushed out for asking too many questions, sat in the gallery every day of the trial with a grim smile, occasionally nodding when particularly damaging evidence was presented. But the real bombshell came when they discovered the insurance fraud. 3 years earlier, there had been a suspicious fire at the HOA community center. Linda had filed a claim for $900,000 in damages and used the money to completely renovate the building. Except the investigators found that she'd hired her brother-in-law's construction company, inflated the damage assessment by $400,000, and pocketed the difference. The fire investigator, who'd signed off on the report, admitted under oath that Linda had paid him $15,000 in cash to exaggerate the damage. The insurance company immediately filed a civil suit to recover their money. Linda's personal assets were frozen, including 3 investment properties nobody knew she owned, a boat she kept at Lake Powell, and nearly $2 million in various bank accounts. Her husband filed for divorce the same week, claiming he had no knowledge of her activities, though investigators were skeptical when they found his signature on several of the fraudulent documents. The federal prosecutor added mail fraud, wire fraud, and insurance fraud to her charges. The case was so complex they had to bring in a special white-collar crime unit from Denver. They found fake receipts, photoshopped invoices, and an entire folder on her computer labeled "Backup Lies," where she'd kept templates for creating fraudulent documents. She'd even written herself notes about which lies to tell to which people, creating a complex web that took months to fully untangle. Meanwhile, the families in Elderwood Heights were dealing with their own nightmare. Some of them had invested their entire life savings into homes they thought were legally theirs. The Johnsons, a retired couple who'd moved from Florida, had spent an additional $100,000 on renovations. The Smiths had just welcomed their third child and now faced the possibility of having to relocate. The emotional toll was devastating, and several families filed a class-action lawsuit against Linda, the developer, and even the title company that had somehow missed this massive oversight. The developer, Peterson Construction, tried to claim they were victims, too. But emails showed their project manager had expressed concerns about the land ownership early on, and Linda had assured him she would handle it. Handle it turned out to mean forging my signature on a deed transfer and filing it with a clerk who was later discovered to be her second cousin. The web of corruption kept expanding, reaching into the county planning office, where 2 employees were fired for accepting bribes to fast-track permits. My lawyer, George, was having the time of his life. He told me this was the kind of case law professors dream about. We were cited in 3 different legal journals before the trial even ended. The State Bar Association invited him to give a presentation on property law and due diligence. He joked that Linda had inadvertently made his career, though he felt terrible for the innocent families caught in her web. I tried to be as fair as possible with the homeowners who were truly victims. I offered payment plans, reduced prices for seniors on fixed incomes, and even forgave the debt entirely for 2 families facing medical hardships. But I had no sympathy for Linda's inner circle who had knowingly participated in her schemes. 5 other HOA board members were charged with conspiracy, though they all took plea deals and testified against Linda. The day of her sentencing was packed. Every seat in the courtroom was filled, and there was a line of people waiting outside. The judge had to issue a warning about maintaining order after someone shouted, "Liar," when Linda took the stand. She tried to give a tearful speech about how she'd only wanted to create a beautiful community, but the judge cut her off mid-sentence. He called her actions a breathtaking abuse of trust and said she destroyed lives through her greed and arrogance. He noted that she'd shown no genuine remorse, only regret at being caught. The psychiatric evaluation revealed narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. Though Linda's lawyer's attempt to use this as a defense fell flat, the judge said her mental health issues might explain her behavior, but didn't excuse it. When he announced the sentence of 12 years instead of the expected 7, Linda's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair and started hyperventilating. Her lawyer requested a recess, but the judge denied it. He continued reading the additional financial penalties, including $1 million fine, full restitution to all victims, and a lifetime ban from serving on any corporate or community board. Linda had to be given oxygen before they could finish the proceedings. The courtroom sketch artist later said it was the most dramatic scene he'd drawn in 30 years of covering trials.